Welcome to embedding a shift left culture in your enterprise. Before we get started, I want to talk you through what you can expect over the next 20 minutes. I will start with a short introduction, followed by why we need shift left and how the new shift left looks like. Then we go into how you get shift left embedded in your enterprise and what you need to do to turn it into a success story. At the end, we'll have time for some questions. My name is Gerald Bachemer. I'm a technical principal at Continua. My background is in software engineering, and I have many years' experience in developing Java code. I've worked in Europe, particularly in Austria, Germany, Italy, and also in New Zealand and Australia. I've worked in several industries, including financial services, education, transport, government, and others. At the moment, I'm focusing on everything around AWS and helping organizations to transform towards a cloud-native architecture. I'm an AWS ambassador, and I believe that automation is part of the customer journey. Why do we need shift left, and how does the new shift left look like? Let's have a look at the 4 industrial revolutions that we had. We had the age of manufacturing. This is where things got produced locally and then sold within the same country. Then later on, the age of distributions, where things got shipped around the world. We then started the age of the customer. This is where your enterprises were using information about the customer, so they could make it easy for you to buy things like a recommendation. People who bought that also bought that product. Things flipped a little bit now. We're now in the age of the customer. That means the customer has all the information to make very well informed decisions. For example, if you look into comparison websites, you can have a look what's the best insurance product for you. And that's the reason why we really need to look after the customer, because they can make the decision where to buy and purchase. If you look at the evolution of the scope of shift left, I'll start with 2001. This is when shift left got mentioned the very first time. It initially had a strong focus on testing, and we had unit tests that got embedded in your pipelines. Then the term DevOps came up, where we changed things so that development and operations were not working in silos anymore. We're working together. Then data democratization came up. This was important for us because this is where contract testing got really strong. Later on, DevSecOps, where security got embedded in the development and operations. And now we talk about the broader coverage of the scope, and we'll look into that. Before that, we'll have a look at the traditional shift left approach, where we have the phases: validate, develop, build, test, measure, learn. So we align with our requirements, try to do the testing really early, like unit tests, for example, or automated integration tests. We then build our software, test it, and then we measure everything within that scope. And based on that, we take our learnings and can improve. So key message here is we start the testing early and detect defects early as well. If you look at the new shift left, the scope has widened now. So we start looking into shift left early in the life cycle, when we already come up with an idea before we even have any requirements. But we also carry it further down the track. We take on the learnings from our operations and deployment. And that's now part of shift left as well, because everything is code. So we can automate those things. And we can use machine learning, for example, to improve our operations. So the result is that the scope is really wide, and our learnings are therefore span a wider scope as well. So it's not only testing, it's much more. It includes procurement, for example, risk, and many other areas. How do we establish a successful approach? Let's have a look now at those phases that we identified as part of our new shift left. So early stage, we have the need. The latest stage, we have the learn. And then we mapped it to buzzwords that you see and hear about all the time. So site reliability engineering, your SLAs will be defined in the needs phase. There is a methodology called the design sprint. We'll look into that more later on. Design thinking, or Amazon has an approach called working backwards from the customer, where you publish your press release first and then you work backwards from that. Then we have DevOps spanning several areas here, really same as DevSecOps, just adding that, embedding that security aspect. Then we have several service level objectives, for example. A couple of buzzwords that always pop up are FinOps, for example. So really being aware of your financial burden or opportunity in terms of return of investment as well for your application investments. Term that has been around, and I've hardly heard it in the last 2 years, was NoOps, when people thought they go totally serverless, there nothing needs to be managed anymore, and things just keep on running automatically. It's not quite, didn't quite hold up. Governance or automation is big now at the moment, especially with financial services and government, and machine learning and operation and ML ops as well. So those are the things how to match up to the different life cycle stages in our new shift left approach. So how do we get started? So first of all, you need to know where you are at, what is your current state. So you need to identify what are your bottlenecks, what's holding you back. Quite often that's handoffs between teams, and one team finishes something and the next team starts 2 days later or a week later, because there's team handoffs and there's no proper collaboration and cross-functional teams that have been established. So you need to collect data points. Those data points will reveal where you have your holdups in the whole process. You should also identify if you have any strategic misalignments, things that bring you further away from your strategy, because people try to take shortcuts and therefore they, for example, don't use an enterprise license, they use something else. Also, business flexibility is quite important. You need to be sure that you can actually achieve this business flexibility. We are now in the age of the customer. You need to be flexible, really, and the customer needs to be taken on that journey. You need to know the pain points across the whole process, and therefore I suggest to interview people. So this could be your internal customers, that's your product owner or application owner, or you do customer surveys. You probably want to do both. Pain points could be something in operations, for example, that defects bubble up fairly late. It might be security issues, certificates have expired, for example, or it might be hold up in procurement because you, for example, pick and choose a new SaaS vendor. They first need to be validated and the risk needs to be analyzed. Those are all things that can hold you up. And if you bring that further forward to the left, that's where your time gain is. And you want to leverage synergies. Yes, you want to do things only once rather than 3 times similar things. And I've seen it with questionnaires that have been sent out from, let's say, data governance and risk, and then there's quite a lot of overlap. So you want to get rid of that and use all those synergies. Value stream mapping is a good approach that gives you visibility of what needs to be done and how you get actually to that result that the customer wants. So you start with your early phase, that's your identifying needs and the ideation. This is a simplified view, so not all the steps that you would potentially have in there. So you first need to go to funding approval process. In financial services, it's quite often the risk department that needs to approve and endorse the solution. You need to validate any third-party vendors that come to the table. So you require to define the requirements. You then develop the feature, test it, and so on, release. So this is breaking it down to the whole value stream, and this is telling you how much time you use for each of those stages in your value stream. So how do you get started with actually improving your situation? So first of all, you need to establish a discovery squad. A discovery squad is a cross-functional team that is working together, so that's a dedicated team. We use that quite often for applications that go to the cloud, so cloud is a cloud, part of the cloud adoption. And then we typically have a technical lead in there, a data engineer, a software engineer, and a security architect, and the application owner. They are, so except the application owner, but the rest of the actual discovery squad is a full-time functioning team. They will need to pull in other people, for example, risk experts from time to time. But because they will go through this approach over and over again and moving things to the cloud, for example, or refactoring an application, they already know what kind of questions need to be asked. And that's why they already build up their own knowledge in that cross-functional team, and they only reach out on a rare occasion once you have that maturity level. You need to prepare your customer journey. So you need to visualize the process. That's for both. You need a view for the customer so they know how to go through the whole journey. And that's, I mean, the internal customer saying that. But also for the team, because whenever you have tasks that need to be done, especially the first time when you start testing your new approach, they need to know where they fit into the whole picture. And you also need to make sure the team understands why you need to change things. And it's usually coming back to return on investment and improved customer experience. So once you have defined your new process, you need to test it. So that's a dry run or a test run. And that doesn't necessarily need to be with all the strategic tools that you want to use. This could be just some very simple on your wiki. That's where how you capture the process, your questionnaires, for example, for the customer, your architecture, how it looks like. And then you collect feedback from the customer and also from the team members. What did they think worked well? So that can be a retro with your own team, but then a formal customer survey will give you good insights where they think things need to improve. So you measure all the data points and the timings for each of those phases while you go through your new process. And that way you can actually compare and find out if things are better when you tweak them here and there a little bit. So the challenges are always there, especially in large enterprises. Quite often there's a resource challenge that you can't get full-time commitment for a discovery team, discovery squad. You need top to bottom buy-in. So only that way you can actually scale it on an enterprise level. Otherwise, you will end up having that only on a niche. That could be a product portfolio, for example, but not on an enterprise level. That cross-functional team, those team members probably haven't worked together before because they would come from different departments. So therefore, you will need a strong technical lead. And if you don't have that, you might need some HR coaching also for a team member. So it really depends on where you are on your HR journey. The issue that can come as well that people don't understand, why are we doing that? So that's why I mentioned before, we need a clear picture how our target process looks like, so we can always anchor our tasks to the process. The question that would come, is this worth my investment? That's typically coming from higher up, the project sponsor. So you need to show that you improve things. And this again can only come when you have really good metrics, how you speed the process up. Therefore, you can have more features coming to the customer or more applications that are being made cloud native friendly. And that way you can actually show that return of investment to your sponsor. What do we need to do to fail fast and improve? A design sprint is a rapid prototyping approach. It was originally invented by two guys from Google. Takes 3 days in their original methodology. We tailored it a little bit and it's 4 days, but you can tweak that as you like. The goal is that you actually want to reduce the risk that you invest time and effort into something that gets thrown away. So therefore you have a really short sprint and you come up with something that you can test. So that's what we want to do. We want to fail fast in shift left and find out why we failed and then improve and do it again. So you would have people coming into workshops on Monday, sketch out solutions. You go fairly quickly into solution mode. You start where's the current problem or the problem we haven't solved yet, or we tried to solve but failed in the past. And you agree on a solution. You come up with a realistic prototype and then you test that with a couple of users. The way we usually start that exercise is by finding out what state are we in at the moment, what is actually working, so we can see that as the goal and vision, and the wind, giving the team the backwind to be actually faster or more efficient, and then what are the rocks on the bottom, what's actually holding us back. And when we take that, what's holding us back, and we move that to another whiteboard that's then describing what we might do, we already get an idea how our process will look like. In times of COVID, where you don't have a physical whiteboard necessarily, because you might not be in the office. Tools that are quite popular and have been used very often for that exercise is Miro. That's one tool, and the other one is called Mural. Once we know how we might do things, we start articulating that process, and I'm mapped it out on the right here. So we would then capture who is doing what. That's your person. What's the input for each step? And that can be a whole lots of things. There could be a whole list of checklists, for example, cybersecurity, data governance, and so on. Then we mapped it to the process, or call the process step, give that a name. And we mapped it to technology. And the technology is potentially a different technology for our rapid prototype. And we move to a more strategic technology later on. And then we map out the outputs. So as you can see, you might want to start on a really high level. So for example, when you look here at the third column in discovery workshops, that's just one input. But once you have a better understanding, you break it down into line items and keep that in a table. If you already had a previous process in place, you can map that, because quite often you get the question asked from the stakeholders, did you address this and that way you can show them, yes, this has now moved here. If you like, you can capture a couple of thoughts on the backlog here. That's helpful during conversations. When you screen share, and you can capture ideas straight away before you then moved into a proper backlog. The discovery squad structure that you use for that purpose is typically a technical lead, an application engineer, data engineer, and a security engineer. If you're talking about software engineering applications being moved to the cloud or refactored in the cloud, you will also need a person that can be one of those four that can cover all the infrastructure concerns. So how do we do that dry run? We have a couple of guiding principles here. We need a dedicated team. Otherwise, you will always hear things like, I have to do my day job. I can't do that right now. And you won't be fast in your whole testing approach, testing that new process. Collaboration is key. So you need your daily stand-ups and interact during the day. And you also need to manage the expectations. And those are the expectations, first of all, of your own team members. That's the discovery squad, but then also of your customers. You're doing it the first time or maybe the second time. There might be a couple of frictions, but we do our best really to help you. During that dry run, you need to make sure that you get continuous feedback from your customers, any concern from your team members as well. Capture metrics. How long does it take you to execute each of those steps? What are your waiting times? So what's your actual effort time versus your elapsed time? And then update the backlog. And be pragmatic around the tools as well. So it doesn't matter if things are only captured in the wiki for now and you want it in a better tool, maybe ServiceNow, for example, or any business process engine later on. So in a nutshell, we want to focus on the people. So you need your dedicated team. That's the discovery squad. Otherwise, you won't be able to scale it to an enterprise level. And you only get that with a top-down buy-in. The process needs to be end-to-end. So this is the new shift left. It's not just testing and pushing things to an environment. It's by far more. It starts with the needs and the ideation all the way to operating, learning, taking all the learnings on board with metrics and then improve again. And then with the tooling, be initially pragmatic, but know where you want to be so that you can move to your strategic solution. And it's important that you have a holistic view of the whole end-to-end process and capture all the metrics on the way. Once you have set that up, you're actually in a good spot to improve continuously and just do it again. And the next time you do it better, and so on. Thank you for your time and attention. And now we do have some time for questions.